All right, sweet children. After the American Revolution, we have the French Revolution. This is a whole bunch of blood, chaos, and heads losing their bodies. I am going to go over the beginnings of the French Revolution here. If at any point I am going too fast, if I'm talking too fast, you can actually slow down the speed of this video. If you don't know how to do that, make sure you ask how to do that. All right. So, France before the revolution. Immediately before the revolution, right before the revolution, French society was set up in a system that was called the old regime. All right. And before, not really before, but during that same time, the old regime overlaps with the Enlightenment. All right. Remember, the Enlightenment was throughout the 1700s, and France was actually one of the main center points of the Enlightenment, and particularly Paris. That is where those super fancy dudes like Voltaire and Jean Jacques Rousseau hung out. All right. So the old regime was the social structure of France. France's social classes were divided into 3 estates. The first estate is the Roman Catholic Church. This includes the clergy, who are the members of the church officials. Living the good life, controlling society, controlling people's minds, and of course, they don't pay taxes because the church is considered at that time to be an extension of God, and you can't ask God to pay taxes. That's ridiculous. The second estate is the royalty, the monarchy. Monarchy is king or queen. Also, government officials, people with money, wealthy landowners, living a pretty good life. They pay some taxes, not the king and queen, because the king and queen are the ones collecting taxes. But these landowners are not paying a whole bunch of taxes to the point where they're not able to maintain their really awesome lifestyles. The third estate is everybody else. 97% of the French population. This includes the middle classes, those urban city people. They were called the bourgeoisie. That's a fancy French word for the middle class. Also includes the lower classes and the peasant farmers. Just like in America and the world today, very few rich people control most of the money, the very top, and everybody else is the third estate, essentially. The middle classes, the lower classes, the poor, the peasants, the farmers, whatever. Compared to the first and second and third estate, they have a whole lot less privilege. But the third estate is also very diverse, right? It includes a middle class. It also includes the poor. The middle class are not poor, but they have less privilege than the second class and the first class. They have less privilege than the second estate and the first estate. And then the poor are like at the very bottom of the third estate. So, what do you think? How do you think that first estate felt about those brand new Enlightenment ideas that were circulating around Paris and France and Europe? Hint, the first estate included the Roman Catholic Church. Explain your answer. Yeah, the Catholic Church wanted to control society. They don't like the Enlightenment ideas too much. They hate the Enlightenment ideas, actually, because the Enlightenment ideas threaten the power of the Catholic Church. Challenging divine right of kings, the idea that God gives a king its power. Challenging the idea that the church knows everything by saying that people have the ability to think for themselves is challenging the Catholic Church's authority. And it is threatening the Catholic Church's control over the people. So they don't like it. How does the second estate, do you think, feel about the Enlightenment ideas? Explain. Yeah, the second estate, the king and queen, the royalty, the monarchy, have power because of divine right of kings. And the old idea of absolute rule, where the government and the kings and queens have complete and total control and authority over the people. The Enlightenment goes against the idea that government controls everything and government knows best, right? There's this whole idea that the purpose of government is to protect people. The idea that people can overthrow the government if they don't like it and doesn't protect their rights. The idea that the government exists because the people want it to exist. Those Enlightenment ideas are not popular with the Second Estate. The idea that the Third Estate has rights, blasphemy, according to the Second Estate and the First Estate. And lastly, how do you think the Third Estate felt about the Enlightenment ideas? Think back to what I said about those French philosophers, Voltaire and Rousseau in Paris. And also tell me, how do you think they felt about the other two estates? Explain. Yeah, like I said, the Third Estate includes the middle class, the bourgeoisie. The Third Estate includes guys like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who came up with the idea that government exists because the people want it to. The Third Estate includes guys like Voltaire, who were super snarky and wrote super sarcastic books and poems and stuff that really ticked off the king and queen and church. Third Estate includes guys like Voltaire, who said that people have freedom of religion and don't have to listen to the Catholic Church. And Voltaire, who also said freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom to believe what you want to believe and think for yourself. Those Enlightenment guys were part of the Third Estate. And they were spreading the Third Estate ideas, the Enlightenment ideas around to the rest of the Third Estate, to the rest of the 97% of the population. And those lower classes, those peasant farmers, all those other people that were not philosophers in the Third Estate, liked those new ideas. They were empowered. The Enlightenment encouraged them to have their own choices, to make their own choices, to have their own opinions, to voice those opinions and make demands for what they wanted. The Enlightenment told the Third Estate that they have rights. And the Enlightenment told the Third Estate that the government is supposed to serve them, not the other way around. The Enlightenment told the Third Estate that they can overthrow the government if they don't like it. And did they like the government? No. They were not happy with the Second Estate and the First Estate, right? Because the church is trying to control their lives and their beliefs. And the government is not paying money and living a really good life, right? Not paying taxes and living a good life. They're the rich, right? Everyone hates the rich. That's a stereotype, at least. So, causes for the revolution. 3 main trigger factors. We have things like revolutions and riots and protests. More often than not, there is something that triggers it that's kind of outside of the people's control. It can be a natural disaster, like in this case. It can be something that has existed in society for thousands of years, hundreds of years, that today's people were not responsible for creating, but might be responsible for maintaining. In this case, we have a famine that is going to make the problems with the old regime, the problems with the estate system, very obvious. A natural disaster that is going to reveal the problems that existed in France's society. A famine is an extreme food shortage. When there is drought, when the soil is overworked and doesn't have nutrients, food doesn't grow. Food doesn't grow, people don't have food, right? Grain doesn't, if you can't grow grain, you can't make bread. Bread, carbs, important food, right? If you can't grow the stuff that your meat eats, right? If you can't grow the stuff that your cows and your pigs eat, you're not getting any meat. What do you think? How would this famine impact France? Yeah, people are dying of starvation, essentially. Their kids are dying of starvation. Now, here's a real question. Which part of French society do you think is dying of starvation? Which estate or estates are dying of starvation? It's the third estate, right? The second estate and the first estate are set up pretty well because they are charging all those taxes from the peasant farmers, and those taxes are paid in the form of food. So the peasant farmers in the third estate are growing whatever little bit of food that they can grow and then paying all that food to the king and queen and giving it to the Catholic Church. We're fine. This carries over to trigger number 2, right? The fact that there is not food, that natural disaster contributes to making the economy problem bigger. When we talk about economy, we are talking about money and businesses. This process right here relates really well to America in the last few years. We had a natural disaster, the COVID-19 pandemic. And that had a very bad effect on the American economy, right? Inflation is crazy high right now. People had less things to sell in the case of France. They had less food to sell. This means that they have less money, so they can't buy as much stuff. And if people are not buying, then businesses are not doing okay. And then on top of that, the government is charging all those crazy high taxes and taking whatever little money and food that the people do have. So, which estate do you think was most negatively impacted by the poor economy? Yeah, that was the third estate, right? Because all the money was going up to the top, to the second and the first. And of course, that is the main issue, right? Trigger number 3, poor leadership. A government that does not know how to handle the problems created by the economy and the problems created by the famine. There's fancy King Louis right over here. See this dude with his like silver sleeves and fur cape, and it's like so extra, and that really large neck thing. He's got that fancy wig going. Look at him with his cane. Even his shoes are silver. Like, really? He spent probably days and days and days just standing just like that, having this portrait painted of himself. by some poor schmuck artist while the people of France are dying of starvation. King Louis and his wife over here, Marie Antoinette, they were too busy having these fancy portraits painted of themselves to pay attention to the problems of the third estate. See Marie over here with her really awesome fancy headpiece and this curtain dress she's wearing with like the giantest squareist like hoop skirt underneath it. Insanity. Not only do King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette have these super fancy portraits painted of themselves wearing all of this super fancy clothing, they show this off to the rest of French society. They're like literally like, ha ha, you poor suckers are dying of starvation, and look at us with our fancy clothes and fancy capes and canes and curtain dresses. Ha ha, suckers. That is King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. They were used to a very comfortable, very extravagant lifestyle. So much so that even though they were in debt and didn't actually have any money because the economy of their country sucked, were too busy spending a whole bunch of money they did not have on fancy things. Right? So at this point, they're not just having fancy portraits of themselves painted and then showing off those fancy portraits. Those fancy portraits are putting the country more in debt. Those capes and skirts and canes and curtains and flowers and everything are making life even harder for the third estate. And then on top of all of that, in order to make sure that the French royal family gets to continue being the French royal family, powerful royal family of Europe, they wanted to do everything they could to hurt the power of the other European countries. They wanted to do anything they could to keep their power and to make the other countries less powerful. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? That is why France helped the American colonies during the American Revolution. The French government, the French king and queen, sent weapons and supplies and actual soldiers all the way across the Atlantic Ocean to help the American colonies fight the war for independence against Great Britain. Because the American colonies win, then that means that Great Britain's power gets less. And if Great Britain, King George III of Great Britain has less power, that's good for King Louis XVI of France. All right. So what I'm actually going to do, because I know that I've been talking for a while, is put an end to this video, and you will have a new Ed puzzle to do for the dawn of revolution, the end of the old regime, and the beginning of the end of the French monarchy. All right.